Hi, I'm Ikea, and for today's video, I want to have a little bit of a ramble about the Ninjabike Backpack, or the Ninjabag as I'll often call it here. And we'll answer a question that gets asked of me a lot, which is that you have this entire build collection. Where are the Ninjabag builds? They are not there, is the answer. And that's because generally, if you can make a build with the Ninjabike Backpack, if you look at it for a little while, you'll go, what if I replace this with this with this, and this with this? And you usually end up with a better build. I've, since its release, I've tried to love the Ninjabike Backpack. It seems so obviously good, right? But it's a trap. In the end, it's generally a trap. And for today, I wanted to discuss two specific builds that I keep seeing popping up here and there, as people often as well send me links to videos or screenshots of them and asking me their opinion, my opinion on it. And that is, first of all, a bad choice, which is to go 2-piece Brazos with it, to go for the magazine size that the 3-piece Brazos will give you with the Ninjabike, together with usually a gear set. In this case, we're going to discuss it on Striker specifically. And the other one, which is less of a bad choice, is likely the least worst choice you can make with the Ninjabike Backpack. And that is going HeadHunter with it. And as, for instance, there's enough bonuses to make it somewhat worthwhile. So yeah, let's jump into the Brazos one first, and we'll go into the HeadHunter one second. And this is the build as we'll be discussing it, although actually with a big change in a second, as I'll explain. Here, this is a build I keep seeing pop up in matchmaking, in countdowns, and just also in videos, as a bunch of people link me to these kind of videos and go like, is this actually good? The answer is no, and we'll go over why in a second. This magazine size is a thing that is often gone for, as people think that, yeah, you can get the skill tier along the way, you can get this magazine size. That has to be good, right? Shooting more bullets has to be good. Not at the cost of, for instance, a Cheska and a Grupo, and also here the Striker backpack, because of course those slots, the Ninjabike backpack going there, precludes the use of the Striker backpack. The Striker backpack is really good for Striker. You would generally go Striker backpack first over the chest. In the calculations in a second, we'll actually be using a different metrics than this specific build, and that is because for this setup, it is better for it, because of that not having that backpack, for it to actually have the Brazos piece here with Obliterate. Now, trying to get a full red one, full red Brazos piece, of course, as they come with blue cores with Obliterate, that's a super unicorn. I'm not going to go for that. Taking one with the blue core with crit chance, crit damage, and then together with Obliterate, or like changing one of the stats if you have Obliterate on it, that makes a lot more sense, but also that makes it way too blue for my taste, or way too, well, giving up even more damage, basically. So in this case, I'm taking these parts, which I already have from the high-end tech tank, although normally here with a blue core, we're taking those pieces together with the speakers, that is also from the high-end tech tank, and using them here, effectively having the same stats, although of course just the talents swap, and in the calculations we'll just be using the other numbers. And yeah, generally this never makes sense to me. This magazine size, I keep seeing it over and over again, together with True Patriots. At least with ongoing directive, there is a case to be made, as magazine size matters there, but even then, you're weakening an already somewhat weaker build. Generally, of course, the Ninjabike backpack is just giving up multiple stats, first of all, versus a high-end with the backpack talent. That's already costly. But of course, what we also have is Memento. Memento also exists. And for instance, here, I would generally pick Memento with just having a Cheska piece alongside of it. That would end up a lot higher. But let's just compare it as well here if we wanted to match it with just a normal strike build, because of course we do get 2 yellow cores, one from the skill tier, one from the Ninjabike backpack. We get 2 blue cores as well, one from the Picaros, one from the Ninjabike backpack again. That does give us a 4-tier shield. There is value there, of course. This is a powerful shield. We also, if we had a different skill than this, we could have a 2-tier foam, for instance, having a few more charges on it. All of those can have value, but is that value worth it versus going a set of different choices, or also going just Striker and just taking 2 blue cores and 2 yellow cores. Does that come out ahead? Let's jump into the calculations and have a look at that. Here we are with the spreadsheet that we'll be predicating most of this discussion on. It will be linked down below, of course, and you can go in there and copy it as well if you want to alter anything, if you copy it to your own Google Drive. And there's these are multi-calculators of my design. If you want to know how they work in depth, you can have a look at a video on my channel that explains them quite well. But for now, all you really need to know is that input happens down here, output happens up here. They're in corresponding rows, so we can compare up to 10 builds. And we're especially getting out a burst and sustained DPS number. Although actually with this one as well, as we'll go into it but a little bit later, is at the right side there is also a damage per mag, although we'll have to do a little bit of scrolling to get to it, as that's generally not part of this. And yeah, each row corresponds together with the rows down below, and we are getting out percentages. Now, here to start off with, the builds that we'll be comparing is a full red obliterate striker here at the top, a Picaro's Brazos plus the Ninjabike plus 3 pieces of striker as we basically showed as the build, and then also an obliterate striker with a matching blue and yellow cores. So we're just basically flipping cores from red to get 2 blues and 2 yellows to match this other build. Because of course, the Picaro's or the Brazos variant with the magazine size, it's not going to compare favorably against a full red obliterate striker. Most people think it does for some reason just because of that magazine size. It definitely doesn't. What we're also going to take as our 100% point is actually this one as the green one. And there are 2 versions of each as because the obliterate strikers, of course, get to have their own coyote. Now, this Brazos loses even worse when it is behind, like if it doesn't have a coyote from somewhere else. But generally in groups, of course, you can expect there to be a coyote from somewhere else, or for instance in Countdown or such. So what we're doing is going with the obliterate strikers going coyote from themselves or getting a coyote from someplace else, and then they get to have, for instance, a group mask. Just to make it a little bit fairer for the Brazos variant, which of course can't have its own coyote, but if it gets a coyote from somewhere else, it kind of evens out the numbers a little bit for it. And yeah, that continues for each of them. So each of them is kind of set up like that. That's also where we're going with the Brazos variant with a coyote from somewhere else as a 100% point. What we have already to discuss first is, yeah, we're going to discuss them as if they have obliterate instead of the chest striker as I showed it with the build, just because that is a little bit fairer for it. Because if we look here at the end, I've put actually we've removed the obliterate, we've made it the chest striker basically at full stacks. The difference here is only 12%. So we're comparing basically this Picaro's Brazos Ninja plus the coyote from somewhere else against this second obliterate striker, which is also getting its coyote from somewhere else. Here, it's only a 12% difference. When we do it with a chest striker, which gets an extra increase, basically, it of course doubles the amount of stacks that you would get from the backpack. You would get a further 35 stacks from the backpack. That becomes 70 stacks from the backpack, of course. Yeah, that difference is way larger. That means that, especially if you really want to go this build, you really want to have that magazine size for some reason, go the obliterate route at the very least. Going chest striker, while easier, of course, you're not looking for a super unicorn at that point, but just for a normal unicorn. But yeah, that comes at a way larger loss. Now, having discussed all that, let's first look at the full red striker versus this build. We'll look at the second number, of course, here. Yeah, it's basically 50% ahead, almost. Now, this, of course, is a full red. The other build has 4 cores towards a shield, for instance, or 2 yellows for any other skill. There is definitely value there. Is there this much value there of difference? As of course, even on sustain, it doesn't compete because the magazine size, of course, doesn't go into burst. It only goes into sustain. But even on sustain, it's so far behind that if you're choosing this as a replacement for a full red, you're already basically doing it wrong. If you're not running a shield, especially, as I see a bunch of those builds set up in that way, you're definitely doing it wrong. You have to kind of make use of these to make it somewhat worthwhile. But then, of course, the much more fair comparison is if we take that same obliterate striker and give it 2 blue cores and 2 yellow cores. So we're matching on cores now. We have the same exact amount of cores on both of the builds. They don't significantly play different, except, of course, we do have a much longer firing time with the magazine size. But even then, if we compare this to 100%, we're losing 12% burst. We're still behind on sustain, just barely. It's closer than it's not a big difference. But is this extra firing time that isn't even gaining you much in sustain, just because, of course, for instance, here we're using Elmo, it has a decently fast reload time. You're not gaining much on the sustain there because the reload isn't that long. You're giving up 12% burst. Is that really worth it? And my answer would be no. I would just rather take these blues and these yellows on the striker pieces and have the same matching amount of skill tiers and blue cores. So we have a 4-tier shield, we can have a 2-tier foam, or even a hive, so you can revive others. I would take that very much over going for this extra magazine size. If we then go and look into the damage per mag, we can see actually that one of the things that I often see is that this damage per mag, that they go like, yeah, this is much bigger than this, so it must be worth it. You have to remember that, well, first of all, if we're not with the KOD, it actually does. if it's solo, which a lot of these builds get recommended for solo, it's actually behind the KOD. It does win against if it's getting it from somewhere else, barely, as yeah, we're comparing here at the top point. So it is ahead by a tiny amount, but this is 105 rounds, meaning that this damage per mag is coming out 35 rounds later. There is no rate of fire difference between these two, so it needs to fire 50% longer to get this damage per mag out. If we compare it to the matching build, it is behind, of course, on damage per mag, but even then, like it's 20% behind on damage per mag, which is a lot less than that 50% magazine size would lead you to believe, because, of course, we are giving up. There is the opportunity cost there. That is always the issue for the Ninjabike backpack. There is a humongous opportunity cost difference, and yeah, we can just match the cores on a normal striker build and just get the same output on sustain still. Now, of course, yeah, you don't hit the reload as often, but the sustain is still even ahead, and the burst is so much ahead. If you were doing something with that magazine size, like I said, with ongoing directive, maybe I could see it, but even then, Memento as well still exists, which, yeah, it's just not going to be worth it. One thing I was curious about is what if we go, and here we have basically the same set of numbers in the same way, but instead of going with the Picaros, because the Picaros, of course, locks us into having a blue core. If we, instead of that one blue core, if we went one more red, could we maybe catch up to the striker? Could we maybe get a bigger difference towards having matching numbers with the other striker, having its cores matching? So here we basically have two pieces of Brazos, so both of them have crit chance, crit damage. We're, of course, foregoing that weapon damage as a minor attribute that the Picaros has, but we are gaining a red core. So we are gaining a red core here versus the original Obliterate Striker. So we're closer to that, at least. Here we're only 40% behind. If we go back up there, we were 46% behind on the second version with the Coyote coming from somewhere else. But of course, what happens here then is if we just take one blue, one yellow on the Striker, instead of trying to go this route, it is even a bigger sustain difference, and it is even bigger burst difference. So we're still better off just taking those blues and those yellows on just striker and just running that. And the other big question is, of course, versus that Picaros variant. So if we just take the two numbers that are basically the Brazos here, and we take the two numbers that are the Picaros here, and just compare those against each other, because of course we're giving up one blue core. How much damage do we, because we now have one blue, two yellow basically, how much damage do we gain for that? And that turns out to be just under 4%. I take the blue core here. And that's, of course, yeah, Picaro's minor, it being a weapon damage. That weapon damage core is much stronger than even, for instance, brand bonuses. Even the friendless brand bonus, or like that could come in here for the Elmo. That's still only 10 weapon damage, where a core is 15 weapon damage. Cores are pretty good, turns out. And yeah, this 4%, I would go to Picaro's variant. Just because, yeah, you do gain an extra blue core, a little bit more tankiness on yourself and your shield, and this 4%, you can just then leave it. But I still wouldn't take it. I would still, if we go back to the Picaros variant here, I would very much just pick having the striker and just taking some blue cores and yellow cores. This is often the thing with Ninjabike Backpack builds, is if you really kind of look at them for a little bit, you'll go, there is, I think, a better way, and there usually is. So yeah, let's look at one different variant, as I'm going to go swap accounts, and we'll go look at the last part of this spreadsheet, which is going into HeadHunter variants. And here we are with a different setup that I also often see cropping up here and there. And that is to go Ninjabike Backpack, to go for HeadHunter with it. This at least makes a little bit more sense to me. First of all, we have enough bonuses here that we can make use of, that especially as well with the marksman or like headhunting builds, headshot and weapon damage, specific or all weapon damage, is basically the things that we want to go for. If we can get detox, DTA, or such, some such, that can also be worth it. But we don't need multiple stats, meaning that, for instance, going as we are here with two pieces of a gear set, where we are giving up an extra stat and the first brand bonus. Although in this case, of course, with the hotshot one, we are getting 30 marksman rifle damage. This is much more enough worth it than that it, yeah, there is no bonus that will actually beat this, really. With Aces 1, Foxes could go here, for instance. It does not land as high as this, of course, especially on the third shot, as yeah, this is marksman rifle damage. It does go into the headshot stored amount. But this is already a little bit closer to like almost not being worth it, especially this hot shot that is very worth it. Two-piecing chain killer, at least again, we have 2 damage bonuses, damage to armor. It is a separate multiplier here, basically, which we don't have on anything else. So it is at its full strength. It is actually pretty strong. We have a Araldi, where we can have the marksman rifle damage bonus, and then a headshot as the secondary popping in, which is also one that we would want. And then, of course, Habsburg. Now, in this case, actually, so I'm using a Habsburg piece here for the damage numbers we're going to be seeing in a second, as they've been taken from in-game, as I didn't want to calculate them out. HeadHunter has a tendency, especially with the DTA, to like be wonky. So we've just taken in-game numbers, matching for all of them. Here, of course, we could have one more weapon handling. I didn't go all the way in for that because I already have an Habsburg chest on this account with the super unicorn. But I wanted to have the chain killer here because, of course, the chain killer will affect the second shot. And for this build, the one thing I will say for it is you don't need to have the two-piece Habsburg to benefit from this extra Habsburg damage. But as we'll see with the numbers, giving up vigilance gets poo-pooed a lot. I feel people go like, it's not up enough, it's not good enough. The thing is, then you could go composure, which is much more easier to proc, and it's still 15 total weapon damage. But vigilance as well is up for that first shot, and that first shot is, to me, like the most important thing that a HeadHunter build really goes for. You want that first shot to be as powerful, and then you can stack off of that. That first shot being more than enough to, for instance, go through a purple means that, yeah, you can, for instance, doing control points, you can start on a purple and go from there. Let's go to the spreadsheet, and this is basically in the same style as we had recently for the in-depth MMR look. I basically copied it from there. We've added in some small additions to it, which is that it also states the backpack talent, and then also if here this HS is hotshot, and if the hotshot is pre-active, meaning that we're either on the second shot going out or we're on the fifth shot or further, meaning that the 20% from hotshot, the amp is active. Now, of course, this build, as we had it there, does not have hotshot at all. That is, to me, it's one of its biggest failings. Is hotshot is actually pretty good. That healing of it, or the bonus armor, healing that becomes bonus armor if you're at full, that's actually really strong and helps quite a lot and will heal you back up here and there. The reload mechanic that it provides you is pretty strong, and of course it's 20%. Even though it is a little bit intermittent, it is actually also pretty strong, especially, for instance, as we use it nowadays with Determined. It's pretty easy to keep it going. Missing is... especially if you just go full Determined and go for the body shots, isn't that hard to keep it up. So here we have then, yeah, it would be pre-stacked, and then of course for these builds we also have the non-pre-stacked version of those builds with Chainkiller RLD here as well, as I'm not even putting it up against the here per se with the two-piece Habsburg. The two-piece Habsburg is in here with its numbers, but we're mostly comparing it actually even with a Chainkiller RLD, because I feel that's the competition here, because in this way you can forego going after that super unicorn. You can just put in an easier piece of Habsburg into it, either in the holster, knee pad, or glove, or mask slot, so that you don't have to go for that chest or backpack, making it a lot easier to get it. We also have here then, those two are down here. This is the build as we saw it a second ago with the Ninjabike Backpack with the Aces and Eights, the RLD, the Habsburg, the Walker and Harris, and the Hotshot. But also a different version where I actually take out the RLD and the aces in this slot, and we actually go 3 pieces of hotshot, so we get the 4-piece hotshot buff. I would actually personally prefer this, although actually I put in 2 pieces of ongoing, as the logo is basically the same as always. Like, did I actually pick the right 2 pieces? I definitely did not. Yeah, those are, so yeah, the other version is this one, as we'll go back to there, is this last one, Ninja, with 3 pieces of hotshot and Walker and Harris, together with the Habsburg piece there, as of course that gives us the biggest bonuses. That 20% that now Habsburg has is actually really strong, and that's the thing that is happening here. This is one of the few cases that where the Ninjabike Backpack actually has enough bonuses to work off of. Because if we're going, for instance, with a high-end build, where you now as well have, for instance, you can go for having contractors and foxes, and maybe even another piece of overlord, giving you accuracy and stability, and also weapon handling. Those kind of choices kind of look like they make sense until you just go, what if we just take a full striker and just put all weapon handling on it? It ends up that the striker just beats it. Of course, it needs to stack. The striker needs to stack, but it's 100 stacks. It's not that hard to get. Against, yeah, a much more... You do get a blue and a yellow. And that much you do get. Here, though, as well, we are getting as well a blue and a yellow. But actually, for this build, that blue and a yellow isn't that useful. Especially if you don't have the 3-piece hotshot build, or the 3 pieces of the hotshot in there with the Ninjabike Backpack. Because that at least benefits a little bit from that extra armor. It is a percentage healing, so the more armor you absolute have, the bigger the heal is in actual total value. And of course also the amount of bonus armor that you get from it. That yellow, though, we still don't really have a good use for it. You could run foam, for instance, that benefits a little bit for it. But usually, for instance, I'm running a spotting drone and a revive hive. Neither of those skills really benefit from a blue. You can't really go shields here either, of course, as we're using marksman rifles. Yeah, that's kind of the downside here. We're not effectively using that part of the build. All of these as well. The numbers are with the SR1 with a grade 25. And yeah, again, the backpack talents, and then if hotshot is pre-active, and that's why we split it also up into two versions where we have the hotshot pre-active and not, because with these other ones, trying to get numbers in the range is actually kind of impossible without having going for that hotshot pre-active, because otherwise it's the second shot. But this is actually what is happening here for the other builds. So yeah, if we compare, we see the same the weapon damage stat as stated in game. Then the first shot, the second shot, which is of course a bonus from Chain Killer to be a little bit higher, versus, for instance, this Habsburg version. That's why that one is, for instance, dipping down here below it. And then the final shot, the third shot. So actually, let's compare first the Chain Killer versus the Habsburg. So what do we gain from that Habsburg version? We actually don't gain that much, it would seem, especially when we're like pre-stacked here. We do, of course, that first shot. This is really the power of that Habsburg, as I quite often get asked, why go for that two-piece Habsburg? That is this. Even with that SR1 on that first shot, this 9.9 is enough. If you have already taken person the shot, you're on the second shot of hotshot, that is bonus, or if you have the bonus remaining from like the last control point that you did, as the bonus does not have a timer, so you can carry it from one place to another. If you have the hotshot buff up, you can start on an elite. This 9.9 with this SR at 25, SR1 at 25. Now, of course, the model 700 even goes here quicker. And yeah, anywhere between 9.7, 9.8 ish is enough to start on an elite solo. And that's the value here. You can just start on an elite to get the chain going, where this 9.4 is just below it. You'll leave an elite on basically half their health bar. And on the second shot, of course, it actually dips below, which might be interesting to some people, and this is, of course, that 25% difference between Chain Killer being the perfect headhunter that mostly affects how fast you stack up. So the second shot is actually a little bit below it, but of course, already we're in the 22 millions, which is basically enough for everything named solo, except, for instance, of course, like legendary bosses or LMG bosses. And then, yeah, it caps out a little bit over 2% higher at this 32 million versus 31. This isn't a significant difference at this point, but yeah, it's especially for that first shot. And of course, bigger number and, of course, the prestige of it. So it is, that's the thing. That's why people ask me often, is it worth it? It depends. Did the story I tell you there sound like it's worth it? It'll depend on you. To me, it isn't generally worth going for, as if you're not already basically have everything else that you want out of life and out of the game. Then go for this. If you have other things to proficiency and expertise and grind for and go for those first. But there's also, of course, a lot of people that have most of the builds that they want, or they mostly just run this one build and they just want it to be the best it can be. Then yeah, it's two-piece Habsburg, especially, of course. Yeah, it is objectively better. It just comes at a very high cost of trying to grind for it, or much more likely trying to watch out for it, as just getting it off the vendors and crafting it is or just buying pieces, parts from vendors, deconstructing them, and then crafting from that is much more likely to get you this over trying to farm for it, as yeah, they are two actual super unicorns. The term is very, very apt for them. Yeah, if we go with other choices here, as we get stuck into that spiel for a second, we have here Vigilance and Bloodsucker on the Chain Killer Araldi variant, just the standard with the 4-piece. So Bloodsucker, you basically, on all of these numbers, you lose 20%. This 7.5, if you have the pre-stack on, if you have it pre-stacked already, this 7.5 is much more than enough to start on a purple, for instance. Where this Bloodsucker for me fails, and why I personally go Vigilance over it, is if we go onto the non-pre-stacked variant, we're dropping here to the 6.2 6.3 basically number. That is actually not enough for a purple. That is just below what a purple needs. So yeah, with the bloodsucker, you need to be pre-stacked to even go after the purple. Of course, with the Chainkiller RLE, the Habsburg does have enough damage there to go after a purple even without pre-stacking anything or being, set up to have a hotshot buff active. And that's really the thing that kind of why I go Vigilance. Here we also have two other variants as they often come up, and I thought I'd take the time here to discuss those as well, as we have Chainkiller plus the gift and Araldi Chest plus the gift. The gift, of course, headshot bonus seems like a decent choice. We generally recommend just going Chainkiller Araldi, and this is the reason. So here, the first shot, especially with the Araldi plus the gift, because of course the Araldi plus the gift is a better choice, except for the second shot, because the Chainkiller, of course, is 5 all weapon damage. Araldi is 10 marksman rifle damage, specific weapon damage. The 10, they're in the same pool. They go into the same pool, meaning that the 10 is basically double the 5, of course. But of course, we're losing perfect Headhunter. So for the first shot, with the Chainkiller, with the Chainkiller plus the gift, you're actually barely ahead of Chainkiller plus Araldi with Vigilance. Now, of course, you do get Vigilance back a second quicker, which isn't really meaningful generally in gameplay. The Araldi plus the gift is close to 2% ahead and is on the 9.6, meaning that it is still not at that point where with the SR1 at grade 25, it can one-shot an elite to start off with. It likely could with a Model 700, of course. But then on the second shot, the Chainkiller, of course, stays on basically the same difference between them as they go up. And that is that the second shot is basically close to the same value to that second shot of the just Chainkiller plus Araldi. But we see the Araldi plus gift version dipping because, of course, it doesn't have perfect Headhunter. So it's a second shot, it's storing less per shot, basically. And this drops down quite a bit. Or, well, actually, the bonus that you get from the stored amount is less, I should say. And then it's dropping down. But, of course, both of these values are perfectly fine. This initial value as well is basically, it's perfectly fine. And then on its capped shot, it is falling behind again, because that, of course, is prevalent on the amount of all weapon damage and specific weapon damage that you have mostly. And, of course, total weapon damage as well then from the Vigilance and DTH. Those are the things that get stored for that stored shot. And then you, on top of the stored shot, of course, you have the initial shot, but that initial or the shot, the current shot. That current shot, of course, here is a little bit higher, but yeah, basically on the cap, they both fall behind. This is usually the reason to go for Chainkiller plus Araldi. You don't gain enough here on the initial shot, and you lose quite a bit on your capped shot, even in the optimal setup of going Araldi plus the gift. But also, it's not a humongous difference. You could run this and be perfectly fine. It's just, it's one of those things of, there is one actual true optimal setup, so that will be the one that usually gets recommended. Yeah, we saw the two-piece Habsburg already. It's the best one, but also the most expensive one. Then we get finally to actually back on topic as we went on a tangent, basically. Which is the Ninjabike with a 3-piece headshot, hotshot, and then Walker and Harris, because that's the only one, of course, that also can pre-stack hotshot. So yeah, if it has the buff active for hotshot as well, it is actually, so on the weapon damage, it actually looks like it is ahead here, of course, numbers wise, just because it does have more weapon damage. It has a ton less headshot damage. So that initial shot actually is a very, very low. And of course, is giving up a Vigilance. Even if we compare this against going for Bloodsucker, we have here 7.5, we have here 8. We have basically 500k worth of difference. I would pick the Bloodsucker here. Even though here you're getting a blue and a yellow extra on top of it, of course. This number being 85% versus this 80% from the Bloodsucker, why not just pick this Bloodsucker is my thinking there. If you don't want to have vigilance. Now, of course, as well, if we had composure, if you don't want vigilance, go composure. Composure, while we don't have it in the list here, just because I didn't want to go for RLD backpack with composure. Composure will definitely beat this because yeah, it is 15 total weapon damage. It is going to be basically in between these two. It's going to beat it here as well. If you had something to do with that blue and yellow, I could maybe see it. But yeah, if we then push on to having the other numbers here, yeah, it you know stays around that 83% of the max damage here, and especially the second shot not being able to kill unnamed, as this 19 million and this 20 million is usually around the range where you might be able to, but some names you might not be able to. They have a range of around starting with this, likely 19.9 all the way to like 20 million, 20 million, 100 or 200. And yeah, the cap shot is perfectly fine at that point as well. But you don't gain much here. To me, this still does not seem worth it. If we go with the non-stacked version, and especially go, of course, that 3 hotshot variant. This other variant is making much better use of bonuses. So here we are again with the hotshot, the Aces and 8, the Walker and Harris, the Habsburg, and then the Ninjabike Backpack variant are already in there as well, as actually it's not in this list. But now, of course, they don't have a backpack talent. We're comparing again against those Vigilance and the Bloodsucker. Here we're taking basically 3 shots from just not having hot shot active with these. So the first shot is actually, of course, unbonused. The second shot then actually is bonused. Of course, hot shots will activate, or the damage component of it is active for that second shot. And then that goes into having the cap as well. If we compare them in that way, so all the hot shots just firing without the pre-stacking done, and then versus these two builds, the first shot is much lower again on these as well. And one of the things is, yeah, this Bloodsucker variant doesn't have enough to actually kill a purple. This 3-piece hot shot does actually have just barely enough to usually kill a purple of assaulters, of grenadiers and such. Of course, a rusher purple, that is much lower. Sniper purple is also much lower. So you can get those, for instance. But yeah, general grenadiers or assaulters, and of course LMGs are much higher than that. This chain killer with Bloodsucker just barely misses out. The 3-piece hotshot is enough, and of course, actually, this amalgamation version with we'll call it the marksman rifle bonuses variant. This has more than enough as well, so you can definitely run it. Its mid shot, of course, is much lower because here the bonus is going to activate, meaning that this shot is going to be percentually much higher than the other version. And then and same also why this version is kind of catching up versus with the Aces and the Habsburg version and such, which is the middle one there. This other one, because of the hotshot buff coming in, is actually catching up. And then, yeah, they both end at much lower numbers than just going Chainkill Araldi. They are, of course, ahead of going Bloodsucker. But also, Bloodsucker has Bloodsucker. Bloodsucker is really powerful. You're getting a ton of kills as hotshot. Personally, I would definitely pick this over going Ninjabike Backpack. I can see the case for it here, though. There is, at least in this case, just because of how the build is set up, and finally having, if we go back to it, finally having a decent a number of things that can be used to get the right amount of stats. And this is also why, for instance, yeah, for just a high-end crit chance, crit damage variant, most of the second bonuses for instance, Cheska, Grupo, all of those things are pretty bad. For contractors, for Fox's Prayer, they're decent as they're at least contributing to the actual thing that you're doing. Same, for instance, for Fenris having reload bonus. But in the same sentence, we could also go like, but you can just grab a strikers and just put a ton of weapon handling extra on it instead of crit chance, crit damage, and you would still be so far ahead that it's not funny. And sadly, it is also not funny. I would love for the Ninjabike backpack. There's been a bunch of ideas floating around. One of the ones that I kind of saw and kind of was like, yeah, this seems like a good idea, is if it looked at which cores you had the most, and if it would, for instance, give you one, maybe even two extra of those cores. So if you're mostly red core, you would get one extra red core. So for instance, here, if you have mostly blue cores, you would get one extra blue core, mostly yellow cores, one extra yellow core. As on top of its normal talent, because yeah, it just ends up opportunity cost wise, it loses out to a lot of other things that you could take in this slot. Generally, any build you can make with the Ninjabike backpack ends up being that if you really think about it, you can find a setup that will match or beat it without giving up much, or even matching it with blue and yellow cores, as we saw with the Brazos version. That is kind of sad for it, because I do want to like this thing. It seems like such a theory craftable piece of gear, right? Like, what if we do this and this and this? But even in the better versions, as for instance, I think this is one of the best things I've seen the Ninjabike backpack do in this setup. I still wouldn't do it. I'm perfectly fine with vigilance. I'm perfectly fine with that first shot being very powerful. Even if I lose it later, I'm okay with that. And especially here as well, we're not doing anything with this blue and this yellow core on top, because we do have a blue and a yellow core extra. That should be noted, very much so, versus the increased damage of the hotshot builds or the Chinkla or Araldi builds. But we don't have really anything we want to do with that. One extra foam is kind of the thing. Like, I could take an extra charge of foam instead of this revive hive. But I like having the spotting drone. I like having this revive hive. There is not much for me to do with those. You could take Achilles, get maybe a little bit extra damage out of that. But in general, I would just pick the more consistent, just hotshot, general hotshot build. So yeah, we've reached this end of this very long ramble. I hope it was somewhat somewhat entertaining, somewhat enjoyable. I hope you learned something. I definitely did. I really wanted to know the numbers of how far behind that 2-piece Brazos build was, and how close this version of this build was to the hotshot variants. And we also got to see what Chainkiller plus gift or Araldi plus gift got to be as bonuses on top of that. So yeah, for my future videos, we're going to go into a few build overviews. I'm hoping to do a bunch of them, actually, as I have a few that I think will definitely fit that short form, 1 minute capped shorts. And yeah, we'll also go into the next build showcase being actually a hotshot build, but a little bit different than the general ones. And also we'll go into having a few more rambling talks, as I've been missing out on doing those, and I want to ramble on about some stuff, especially about improving, well, a little bit of build theory crafting coming up, and also a little bit of improving your own playstyle, and how I would go about, how I'll go about fixing up my own mistakes as I make them. So hope you join me for those. If you enjoyed this video and want to help out, if you can help out with all of the algorithm things all around this site, I would much appreciate that. And as always, have a good night.